Hey guys, welcome to Film Learning, the show dedicated to learning you some filmmaking and learning you good. Now we had a fantastic response to our Dragon Ball instant transmission effect last week, and that continues this week with this request from Obi89 who said, I think a Kamehameha would be also cool to see. Yes, I think so too, Palo. Now it's taken me a few more days than usual to figure this one out, as there's no real definitive live-action Kamehameha effect out there. I even managed to torture myself by watching Dragon Ball Evolution, a movie that I've avoided for 5 years due to its rather smelly reputation. See what I do for you? Not only did the movie suck, but the Kamehameha wave looked awful and nothing like the show. So how do we do it? We'll be using a combination of animated elements, Video Copilot's lightsaber glow preset, and animating some shape layers. First off, let's look at the live action footage you'll need. The Kamehameha has been shown a bunch of different ways on the show, but the basic edit always remains the same. A close-up of the hands, a medium shot of the character moving their hands behind, cuts to a close-up of the face, back to the hands as it charges, cuts back to the face, and then cuts to a wide shot as it releases. So when you shoot your footage, feel free to experiment, but try to keep the framing within the same realm. Now before we get into it, I just want to let you know I've used two different plugins to create this effect. Trapcode Particular and Trapcode Shine, neither of which are free, but I'll add a download link in the description so you can get yourself a trial. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I won't be showing how I use Particular in the tutorial. Instead, I've created the Kamehameha Kit, a free download with all the assets you'll need to create this effect. All of them are rendered in 2K and they're already alpha channeled, so all you have to do is just drag them and drop them in the composition. I've rendered out the parts from a few different angles, so hopefully you can find the one that suits your needs. Now remember the lightsaber glow preset we've used several times now? No? Then you can download it in the description. It's cool, it's free, and unless you want to fart around with the glow settings for the next year, you're gonna need it. So, let's get into it. Open up a new composition at 1920 by 1080 and name it Ball. Next, we'll head up here and grab the ellipse tool. Set the fill to white and set the stroke to no stroke. From there, we'll hold down shift and draw a circle. When you hold down shift, it keeps all the parameters even. Let's head over to presets, grab our glow and drop it on our sphere. To add the look of the pulsating energy, we'll grab an adjustment layer, then head up to effect, distort and turbulent displace. Set the displacement to turbulent, set the offset to the center of your sphere and crank up the size and amount to something that looks right for you. My numbers are amount 37, size 45. From there, we'll hit the stopwatch on evolution, head to the end of the clip and crank it up to nearly 2 evolutions. This will give it plenty of organic movement, but now that's done, it's time to animate it. Lock your adjustment layer, select your shape layer and hit S to bring up scaling. Hit the stopwatch and bring it down to 0. In order for it to feel like it's growing gradually, skip forward about 8 to 10 frames and bring it up to say 35%. Skip forward again to the 1 second mark or so and crank it up to fit your hands. In my case, that was 154%. To give the impression it's still growing, skip to the end of the comp and crank it up a little more. My final number hit around 180%. Okay, your Kamehameha charge has now been animated. Let's place it in our scene. There's 2 shots we'll be using it in, the initial charge and then the launch. Make sure you have these clips ready to go and sent to After Effects before you move on. We've covered sending clips from Premiere to After Effects in this episode here. Now that our charging clip is set up in a comp, let's drag and drop our Kamehameha in. If you need to adjust where the ball is sitting in relation to your hands, reopen the comp and move the shape layer using the position controls. Once it's in place, we'll head back to the clip and duplicate the ball. Next, change the transfer mode on the top layer to lighten and on the bottom layer to screen. This will give our glow a bit more depth. From there, we'll add an adjustment layer, position it below the ball, grab the pen tool and draw a mask on the inside of our hands. We'll then head up to Effect, Color Correction, Exposure and crank it up until it blows out the hands slightly. This gives the impression of light fall off from the charge. In order to have the light brighten as the ball grows, we'll hit T, bring up opacity, hit the stopwatch, crank it to 0 and turn it up in increments as the ball grows until it reaches 100%. A good rule of thumb would be using the same animation points as the ball growing. Hit F on the keyboard and feather it out a good amount, say around 80 to 90 pixels, so it blends nicely. Now that our animation is set and our fall-off's in place, it's time to add Trapcode Shine. As I mentioned before, you can download a fully functional trial in the description below. Add a new adjustment layer, and then we'll head up to Effect, Trapcode, and add Shine. I haven't had this for very long, so I'm not going to pretend I'm a genius at this program. I merely played around with the settings until I was happy. I encourage you to do the same. Here are my settings if you're following along. I set the source point to the center of the ball, the ray length to 0.06, the shimmer amount to 10, detail to 10, change the colorize to electric, the base onto blue, the source opacity to 100, the shine opacity to 46, and set the transfer mode to lighten. We don't want it affecting the whole shot, so we'll grab the pen tool and draw a rough mask around the ball and then animate it to grow as the ball does. We'll hit MM or expand down the mask settings, hit the stopwatch on mask path, and work backwards, shrinking the mask down at our animation points. We'll finish this off by hitting the stopwatch on mask opacity, crank it down to 0 on the first frame, and then turn it up to 100 at the first animation point. Okay, we're done with that shot. Let's check out a RAM preview of the finished product before we move on. Nice. Right, we've done the hard work. Now let's launch this sucker. Before we head over to our launch clip, select the ball comp, hit Ctrl D to duplicate it, open that up, skip to the middle of the comp and hit S on the keyboard to bring up your scale settings and hit the stopwatch. This will remove our growth animation as we don't need it for this shot. Center the ball with the position controls, close the comp and then drag and drop it from the project menu into our launch clip. And we'll change the transfer mode to lighten. Let's turn down the opacity a tad so we can see our hands. We'll then hit P, hit the stopwatch and then we'll match the hand movements of our actor. We'll keep going all the way up to our launch. I actually kept going from the launch point a little bit longer just to make sure the coverage is right. You can also track your hand movement to a null from this point if your hands are moving around a little bit too much. Or just eyeball it, it's up to you. Once you're done, crank the opacity back up and we'll turn that layer off. We still have to make it look like we're holding the ball, so it's time for some more masking. Select your footage layer and duplicate it. Grab the pen tool and draw a mask around your top hand. Hit M on the keyboard and hit the stopwatch on mask path. Go forward frame by frame and track your hand movements until the halfway mark, as we're going to hide the transition with motion blur. Once you get to a point where you think you can hide the effect, hit Ctrl-Shift-D to split the clip and delete the excess. Turn the ball layer on, duplicate it and give it the same transfer modes as the earlier shot. Top lighten, bottom screen. Head back to the hand layer, hit F and feather it slightly, around 5 pixels should do, and make sure it's back on top of the ball layers. Now, let's add shine. To make this easier, just copy the adjustment layer from our last shot, paste it on top, hit M and remove the mask. We'll then grab the pen tool and draw a new mask around the ball. Hit M, hit the stopwatch and match the movements of the ball until the launch. We'll also animate the source point to follow the ball, so hit the stopwatch and move the point as the ball moves. When you get to the launch point, move the point to the side closer to your body so it spreads the light rays away from your body. Hit F and feather this out also. Anywhere from 60 to 75 pixels will be good. At this point, if you haven't already, turn on motion blur for the ball layers and the comp and do a RAM preview to make sure it works. Not bad. Now when we get to the point of the launch, we're going to adjust the scale of the ball also to accommodate the energy release. Hit S to bring up scale and we'll add a keyframe a few frames before, scale it up a little as we lunge forward, and then we'll skip ahead a couple more frames and scale it up a bit more to give the impression of the energy bursting out. Not bad, but let's change up the settings in Shine to showcase the amount of energy that's being cast. We'll change the ray length to 4.5, head back to the first frame of our animation, hit the stopwatch on Shine opacity. Next we'll move to the launch point and crank it up to 100. Man, that looks way better. The next step is easy. We're going to grab our energy wave from the Kamehameha pack and drop it into our comp. We'll then scale it down and match up the timing to our footage by dragging it into place. Once we've got it in place, we're going to drag the layer below our ball comp and bam! Instantly blended. The last step in the process is to add some lighting fall-off effects to sell the energy blasting out in the scene. We've covered these in the Force Lightning tutorial and the Lightsaber tutorial. You can check them both out here. In this particular shot, I've added 4 different adjustment layers to enhance the effect. One on the right side of our actor's body as the ball moves up to release, one that kicks in when the burst of energy occurs. This one's affecting our hands, face and torso. For this, I went to Effect, Color Correction and Exposure, and then turned up the gamma and exposure. To make it kick in, I simply animated the opacity at the point of the burst. Our next adjustment layer turns the exposure up for the entire scene for a few frames just to sell that flash of light a little more. And the last adjustment layer was a color correction that starts at the point of the burst, giving everything a blue hue. This was just adding a curves adjustment and turning up the blue. And finally, just to be super anal, I went up to Effect, Generate, grabbed a CC light rays, and animated source point to stick to the ball throughout the entire clip. Add all those steps together and you'll get something like this. So there it is, launching a Kamehameha wave. Believe me guys, I know this is a lot of steps. It took me nearly a week to figure out the best way to do this, keeping with the style of the show, but still being able to sell it in the real world. This may be our longest episode yet, but it's also our most complex. There's tons of tutorials on YouTube that cover the Kamehameha, but they all seem to only do it from one angle, the side. Using my method in the Kamehameha pack below, you should be able to pull it off from a few more angles, and that'll make your shots way more interesting. Well, that's it for me this week, guys. If you like the effect, please be sure to subscribe. If you have a request, here's my Twitter, throw a comment below or give a thumbs up, and don't forget to share it up because that really helps us out. And as always, keep learning!